The dust on her boots was 3 days old when Ayasha pushed open the door to Murphy's General Store, the only place within 50 miles of Fort Defiance where a person could buy flour that wasn't crawling with weevils. It was September 1878, and the Arizona Territory sun had baked the earth so hard that even the lizards moved slow. But Ayasha needed supplies for her grandmother who had taken ill with fever. She had ridden through the night to reach this trading post town, her mare's hooves leaving prints in sand that would be gone by morning. The bell above the door chimed, and every head in the store turned toward her. Ayasha felt their eyes like brands on her skin, taking in her long black hair braided down her back, the traditional jewelry her mother had made, the worn calico dress she had traded for last winter. She held her head high and walked toward the counter where a thin man with a mustache like a rat's tail stood counting coins. "Excuse me, sir," she said. Her English perfect thanks to the mission school she had attended until her father pulled her out. "I need to purchase flour, sugar, and medicine if you have any laudanum." The man looked up, his watery blue eyes narrowing. "We don't serve Indians here. Get out!" The words hit her like a physical blow, though she had heard variations of them before. "I have money, gold coin. I only need—" "Did I stutter, girl?" The man's voice rose, drawing more attention. "No redskins in my store. You people got your own trading posts on the reservation. Go back where you belong." Heat flooded Ayasha's cheeks, a mixture of shame and fury that made her hands shake. She had been born on this land, had walked these red rocks before any white man came with his deeds and his fences. Her people had traded here for generations, back when it was just a watering hole in a dream. "My grandmother is dying," she said quietly, desperately. "Please, I will pay double." "I said get out." The man came around the counter, his hand moving towards something under his apron. Ayasha stepped back, her heart hammering. She would not cry. She would not give them that satisfaction. She turned toward the door, her vision blurring despite her best efforts. That was when she heard the voice, deep and calm as a river stone. "Hold on now, Murphy." A tall figure unfolded from where he had been examining saddles in the corner. The man was young, maybe 25, with sandy hair that curled at his collar and eyes the color of summer grass. "To a paying customer?" Murphy's face went to a paying customer? Murphy's face went red. "This ain't your concern, Dalton. I run my store how I see fit. Seems to me a store is for selling goods." The cowboy, Dalton, walked forward with the kind of loose-limbed grace that spoke of years in the saddle. "And this young lady has money to spend." "She's a dirty Indian," Murphy spat. "I don't care if she's got the whole damn mint in her pocket. I won't have her kind in here spreading disease and thieving." Ayasha saw Dalton's jaw tighten, saw something flash in those green eyes that made Murphy take a step back despite himself. "I have known many men in my time," Dalton said, his voice soft and all the more dangerous for it. "Good men and bad men. Men worth riding beside and men who deserve to be left in the desert for the buzzards. And I can tell you for certain that character has nothing to do with the color of a person's skin and everything to do with what is in their heart." He turned to Ayasha, and his expression softened. "Ma'am, what do you need?" She stared at him, caught off guard by the genuine respect in his tone. "Flour, sugar, and medicine. My grandmother has fever." "Murphy, gather those items and put them on my account," Dalton said, not taking his eyes off Ayasha. "The hell I will," Murphy shouted. "Get out of my store, both of you." Dalton turned back to the storekeeper, and whatever Murphy saw in his face made the smaller man go pale. "Fine, have it your way." He offered his arm to Ayasha like she was a fine lady at a church social. "Ma'am, would you do me the honor of accompanying me outside? I have a business proposition for you." Ayasha's mind reeled, but she took his arm, feeling the solid strength of muscle beneath the worn cotton of his shirt. They walked out together into the blazing afternoon sun, and she heard Murphy cursing behind them, heard the other customers whispering. Outside, Dalton released her arm and turned to face her properly. Up close, she could see the sun lines at the corners of his eyes, the scar that cut through his left eyebrow, the honest openness of his expression. "I am going to build you your own store," he said. Ayasha blinked. "You are what?" "Build you a store. A proper trading post where everyone is welcome, where Navajo and white and Mexican and whoever else can come trade in peace." He said it like it was the most natural thing in the world, like he promised such things every day before breakfast. "You do not even know me," Ayasha said slowly. "Why would you do this?" Dalton looked out at the red rocks rising in the distance, at the endless sky that stretched forever in every direction. "My mother was Cherokee," he said quietly. "She died when I was 10, back in Tennessee. Died because no white doctor would treat her, and the nearest Cherokee healer was 2 days' ride away. My father, he was a white man, a farmer. He loved her more than his own life. Watching her die, knowing she could have been saved if just one person had shown her basic human decency, it broke something in him. He put a gun in his mouth 6 months later." Ayasha felt her throat tighten. "I am sorry." "I have been working ranches since I was 11 years old," Dalton continued. "It saved every penny. I have money put by, enough to build something good. I've been looking for the right place, the right purpose." He looked at her, and she saw the absolute certainty in his eyes. "This is it? This is what I'm supposed to do? Will you help me?" The reasonable part of her brain screamed that this was madness, that she had known this man for all of 5 minutes, that people did not just build stores for strangers out of the goodness of their hearts, but there was something in his face, something true and solid, that made her believe him. "My grandmother needs medicine today," she said. "Not in a month when a store might be built." "Then we will ride to Fort Sumner," Dalton said immediately. "It is 2 days hard riding, but they have a post surgeon there who owes me a favor. We can get proper medicine and be back before the week is out." "You would do this? Ride 4 days for someone you have never met?" Dalton smiled, and it transformed his whole face, made him look younger and more alive. "Ma'am, I do not believe I caught your name." "Ayasha," she said. "Ayasha Begay." "Well, Miss Begay, I am Jackson Dalton, and yes, I would ride to the ends of the earth if it meant helping someone in need. That is just who I am. Now, do you have a horse?" She nodded toward where her mare stood tied to a post, head hanging with exhaustion. "She is done in," Dalton observed. "You can ride with me. My gelding can carry double, and we will make better time that way. We can stable your mare at the livery here, let her rest while we are gone." Everything was happening so fast that Ayasha felt dizzy. "I cannot ask you to do this." "You did not ask. I offered." Dalton was already moving toward a magnificent buckskin gelding that stood hip-shot near the water trough. "Besides, we have a store to plan. That will give us plenty to talk about on the trail." Against all logic, against every warning instinct she had, Ayasha found herself nodding. Maybe it was desperation for her grandmother's sake. Maybe it was the memory of the respect in his eyes when he looked at her. Maybe it was simple loneliness. The bone-deep weariness of always being turned away, always being less than in the eyes of these newcomers to her homeland. Whatever it was, she found herself securing her mare at the livery, transferring her small bag of belongings to Dalton's saddle, and then accepting his hand as he helped her up behind him. The gelding, a horse called Ranger, she would learn, barely flicked an ear at the extra weight. "Hold on tight," Dalton said. "We have a lot of ground to cover." Ayasha wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling the heat of him even through his shirt, and they rode out of that nameless settlement, heading east toward Fort Sumner, and a future she could not even begin to imagine. The first night they made camp by a shallow creek where cottonwoods offered shade, and the water ran clear over smooth stones. Dalton proved himself skilled at camp work, quickly building a fire and setting coffee to boil, while Ayasha gathered mesquite beans and prickly pear fruit. They ate hardtack and jerky, drank bitter coffee, and talked. "Tell me about your grandmother," Dalton said, his back against a rock, his long legs stretched out toward the fire. Ayasha sat across from him, watching the flames dance. "Her name is Dolly. It means bluebird. She is the oldest of our family, keeper of stories. She knows the songs of healing, the prayers for rain, the history of our people going back to the time of emergence." She smiled sadly. "She says I am too much like my mother, too willing to trust outsiders, too ready to believe in the possibility of peace." Was she right? About your mother? "My mother married a white trader when she was 17. He was kind to her, treated her like she was precious. They were happy for 5 years. Ayasha poked at the fire with a stick, sending up a shower of sparks. "Then he got sick with cholera. His family came from back east for the funeral. They took everything, said my mother had no legal right to any of it because Indian marriages did not count in white law. They left her with nothing but me to feed." "What happened to her?" "She survived. We survived. She went back to our people. And they took us in, though. Some said she had made her choice when she married outside. She died 3 winters ago when the government rations did not come and we had no stores to see us through. Just went to sleep one night and did not wake up." Ayasha looked up at him. "But she never regretted loving my father. She told me that before she died. She said love was always worth the risk, always worth the pain that might follow." Dalton was quiet for a long moment. "Your mother was wise. My father said something similar once before he died. He said that the months he had with my mother were worth a lifetime of living without her." "You said you were 11 when your father died. Where did you go?" "Worked on ranches, like I said. First in Tennessee, then I drifted west. Worked in Texas for a few years, drove cattle up to Kansas, then worked my way to Colorado and down into New Mexico territory. About 6 months ago, I came to Arizona. Took a job at the Triple Bar Ranch outside Fort Defiance. That is why I was in town today. I'd quit my job this morning, was planning to move on. Then I heard Murphy treating you the way he did, and something in me, just I do not know, clicked into place." "You quit your job the same day you decided to build a store?" Ayasha shook her head. "You are either the bravest man I've ever met or the most foolish." He grinned at her across the fire. "Maybe both. But I meant what I said, Miss Begay. I am going to build you that store. Build us that store, a place where everyone is welcome." "And you expect me to help run this store?" She tried to keep her voice skeptical, but hope was a dangerous thing fluttering in her chest like a trapped bird. "If you are willing. You know the land, know your people, know what they need. I know building and business, know how to deal with suppliers and shipping. Together we could make something real, something that matters." The firelight cast shadows across his face, made his eyes seem very green and very serious. Ayasha felt something shift in her chest, some wall she had carefully constructed beginning to crack. "I will think about it," she said quietly, "after we save my grandmother." "Fair enough," Dalton agreed. He stood and stretched, his joints popping. "We should get some sleep. I want to be in the saddle before dawn." He laid out his bedroll on one side of the fire, tossed her his spare blanket without comment. As Ayasha settled down on the hard ground, staring up at stars so thick they looked like spilled salt, she found herself thinking about trust and risk and the strange paths life could take. Yesterday she could not have imagined any of this. Tomorrow, who knew what might happen? They reached Fort Sumner late the following evening, both of them swaying with exhaustion. True to his word, Dalton had a friend there, a gruff army surgeon named Hollis who asked no questions and simply handed over a bottle of quinine and another of willow bark extract. "Brew the willow bark for tea, helps with the fever," Hollis instructed Ayasha. "Quinine, give her a spoonful morning and night until the fever breaks. Make sure she drinks plenty of water." "How much do I owe you?" Dalton asked, reaching for his money. Hollis waved him off. "You saved my life in that saloon fight in Socorro. We are square." He looked at Ayasha with kind eyes. "You take care, miss. That grandmother of yours is lucky to have someone who loves her enough to ride so far." They stayed that night in a boarding house, Dalton insisting on paying for 2 separate rooms despite the cost. "I will not have anyone question your reputation," he said firmly, and Ayasha felt that crack in her wall widen a little more. The ride back was easier, faster, with hope in their saddlebags in the form of brown glass bottles. They talked more, sharing stories of their lives. Dalton told her about his years cowboying, about storms and stampedes, about watching the sun rise over the plains of Kansas with dust in his throat and possibility in his heart. Ayasha told him about her childhood, about learning to weave from her grandmother, about the stories of the holy people and the lessons they taught. "You speak English perfectly," Dalton observed, as they watered the horse at a spring. "Better than most white folks I know." "Mission school," Ayasha explained. "I was there from age 5 to age 12. They wanted to, how did they say it, civilize us. Take away our language, our culture, make us into proper Christian citizens," she laughed bitterly. "My father finally took me out when they cut off my hair as punishment for speaking Navajo. He said he would not let them steal my spirit along with my braids. Yet you kept the English." "Knowledge is power," Ayasha said simply. "I may not agree with how they tried to teach us, but language is a tool. The more tools you have, the better you can build the life you want." Dalton looked at her with something like wonder. "You are remarkably practical for someone who has every right to be bitter." "Oh, I am bitter," Ayasha assured him. "I am angry at what has been done to my people, angry at the lies and broken treaties, angry at men like Murphy who see me as less than human. But anger alone builds nothing. Anger has to be forged into something useful, something that creates rather than destroys." "Is that what you think we could do? Create something with this store?" Ayasha met his eyes. "I think you genuinely believe we could. And your belief is, it is compelling." By the time they reached her grandmother's hogan, tucked in a red rock canyon near a reliable spring, 4 days had passed since Ayasha first walked into Murphy's store. She slid off Ranger before Dalton had fully stopped, running toward the low dwelling. Inside, in the dim, cool space that smelled of earth and smoke and sickness, her grandmother lay on a pile of sheepskins, her breathing shallow and rapid. Ayasha's cousin Chi sat beside her, sponging her forehead with a damp cloth. "You came back," Chi said, relief evident in his voice. "I was not sure you would make it in time." "I brought medicine," Ayasha said, already pulling out the bottles. "Help me get some water boiling." For the next several hours, she and Chi worked to get the medicine into Dolly, to cool her fever, to make her comfortable. Dalton stayed outside, tending to his horse, keeping respectfully clear of the family's private space. But when darkness fell and Ayasha finally emerged, exhausted and hopeful because her grandmother's fever had already begun to break, she found him waiting. He had built a small fire, had coffee ready, had even managed to shoot a rabbit that was now roasting on a spit. "How is she?" he asked, rising as Ayasha approached. "Better. The fever is down. I think she will recover." Ayasha felt tears prickling at her eyes, the release of days of fear and tension. "Hey now," Dalton said softly, and then somehow she was in his arms, her face pressed against his chest, his hands gentle on her back. "It is all right. She's going to be all right." Ayasha let herself cry, great heaving sobs that she had been holding back for what felt like forever. Dalton just held her, solid and warm and steady, murmuring wordless comfort. When she finally pulled back, embarrassed, he just handed her his bandana. "I am sorry," she said, wiping her eyes. "Never apologize for caring about someone," he said. "That is nothing to be ashamed of." They sat by the fire, sharing the rabbit and weak coffee, and Ayasha felt something fundamental shift in how she saw this strange cowboy who had appeared in her life like a character from one of her grandmother's stories about the trickster coyote bringing unexpected gifts. "When do you want to start building this store?" she asked suddenly. Dalton's head snapped up. "You mean it? You will help?" "On one condition. We are equal partners. You do not build this for me, you build it with me. I will not be some charity case you can feel good about." A slow smile spread across his face. "Deal. Equal partners." He held out his hand, and Ayasha shook it, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. We should seal it properly, she said, and stood, walking into the hogan. She returned with a leather pouch and sprinkled pollen in a circle around them, speaking words in Navajo, asking for blessing on this new venture. Dalton watched with respect and interest, not mocking, not dismissing. When she finished, he said, "In Tennessee, my mother's people would have planted a tree, but this land is too dry for that." "So we will build a tree of wood and nails instead," Ayasha said, "a place where people can gather, can find shelter." "A store," Dalton said. "A store," Ayasha agreed. Over the next week, as Dolly continued to improve under Ayasha's careful nursing, Dalton and Ayasha began to plan in earnest. Dalton rode back to the settlement to retrieve Ayasha's horse and to scout potential building sites. He returned with news that had Ayasha's blood boiling. "Murphy has been spreading rumor," Dalton reported, his jaw tight with anger, "saying that you and I are living in sin, that I have been bewitched by a savage woman, all sorts of filth." "Does this surprise you?" Ayasha asked wearily. "People like Murphy cannot stand the idea of seeing us as fully human. They must make us monsters in their stories." "It is more than that," Dalton said. "He has gotten some of the other merchants riled up. They are saying they will not do business with anyone who associates with me, will not supply us even if we have money." Ayasha felt her dream crumbling before it had even begun. "Then how can we build a store? We need lumber, nails, supplies." Dalton's eyes gleamed. "That is the thing. I rode all the way to Albuquerque last week. Found suppliers there who could not care less what Murphy thinks. They will ship everything we need via freight wagon. It will cost more and take longer, but we can do it." "You rode to Albuquerque?" Ayasha stared at him. "That was over a week's journey." "When?" "While you were caring for your grandmother. I told you I was scouting. I wanted to make sure we had options before I said anything." He grinned. "I also filed papers to register our business properly. The territory of Arizona recognizes us as the Begay Dalton Trading Company." Ayasha's breath caught. He had put her name first. She looked at this man who had upended his entire life for a stranger, who rode hundreds of miles to make sure they could build their dream, who treated her like an equal partner in every possible way. "Jackson Dalton," she said slowly, "you are a remarkable man." He ducked his head, suddenly shy. "I am just trying to do right." "No," Ayasha said, "you are doing more than that. You are changing things, building something new." Their eyes met across the fire, and Ayasha felt her heart kick hard in her chest. This was dangerous territory, more dangerous than any business venture. This was about feelings she had no right to have, not so soon, not with so much uncertainty ahead. But her mother's words came back to her. Love is always worth the risk. The supplies arrived 3 weeks later, great wagons full of lumber and nails and glass windows and everything they needed to build a proper store. Dalton had chosen a site near a crossroads about 5 miles from the settlement, close enough to draw customers, but far enough to be out from under Murphy's shadow. There was good water nearby and room to expand. Chi and several of Ayasha's other relatives came to help with the building. At first they were suspicious of Dalton, protective of Ayasha, but the cowboy won them over with hard work, respectful questions about their culture, and an absolute refusal to be anything less than honest. "He is a good man," Dolly pronounced one evening. The old woman had recovered fully and had come to see the building site leaning on a walking stick. "He has a good heart. You could do worse, granddaughter." Ayasha felt her cheeks heat. "Grandmother, it is not like that. We are business partners." Dolly cackled. "I may be old, but I am not blind. I see how he looks at you when you are not watching. I see how you soften when he comes near. Do not lie to an old woman. Even if I did care for him that way, it would be complicated," Ayasha said quietly. "Our worlds are very different." "Your mother said the same thing," Dolly reminded her, "and she was happy for as long as she had. Do not let fear steal your joy, child." As the walls of the store went up plank by plank, Ayasha found her grandmother's words haunting her. She and Dalton worked side by side every day, falling into an easy rhythm. He taught her carpentry skills, how to drive a nail true, how to measure and cut. She taught him more Navajo words, shared her knowledge of the medicinal plants that grew nearby, explained the significance of facing the door east toward the rising sun. They talked endlessly about everything and nothing. He told her his dreams of building not just one store, but several, creating a network of fair trading posts across the territory. She told him her dreams of opening a school where Navajo children could learn without losing their culture, where both languages could be taught with equal respect. "We could do that," Dalton said one evening as they sat on the half-finished porch watching the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold. "Once the store is profitable, we could use some of the money to start a school." "You would do that?" "Why not? The whole point of this is to build something better, something that helps people." He looked at her, his green eyes serious. "I meant what I said that first day, Ayasha. I am not doing this just to make money, though I hope we do. I am doing this because it is right, because your people deserve to be treated with dignity, and building this store is one small way to make that happen." Ayasha felt something break open inside her. Some last barrier she had been holding on to. She reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "Jackson," she said softly, "I need to tell you something." He turned to face her fully, his whole attention focused on her. "I am listening." "I am falling in love with you," she said, her heart hammering. "I did not mean to. I told myself it was foolish, that we barely know each other, that there are 100 reasons why it is a terrible idea, but I cannot help it. You are everything good that I had stopped believing existed in this world." For a moment, Dalton just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then a smile broke across his face like sunrise over the mountains. "Thank God," he breathed. "I've been falling for you since the moment you took my arm in that store, so proud and dignified despite everything. I did not want to say anything, did not want you to think I was only helping you because I expected something in return." "Are you saying you love me?" Ayasha asked, barely daring to believe. "I am saying I love you," Dalton confirmed. He raised their joined hands and kissed her knuckles gently. "I love your strength and your intelligence and your compassion. I love how you care for your grandmother, how you dream of building something better for your people. I love your laugh and the way you get this little crease between your eyebrows when you are concentrating. I love every single thing about you, Ayasha Begay." She kissed him then, leaning across the space between them, her hand coming up to cup his jaw. He made a small sound of surprise and then kissed her back, gentle at first and then deeper, his hand tangling in her long hair. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ayasha felt like she was glowing from the inside out. "So where do we go from here?" she asked. "We finish building our store," Dalton said. "We make it the best trading post in the territory, and then, if you are willing, we build a life together. A real life. I want to marry you, Ayasha. I want to do it right. Ask your grandmother for permission, have a proper ceremony in whatever tradition you prefer. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to build our dreams together." "Yes," Ayasha said simply. "Yes to all of it." The Begay-Dalton Trading Company officially opened for business in October of 1878, 2 months after that fateful day in Murphy's store. The building was beautiful, sturdy wood construction with large windows that let in light, wide doors that welcomed everyone. Inside, the shelves were stocked with everything from basic staples like flour and sugar to luxury items like ribbon and peppermint candy. There was a separate section for traditional Navajo goods, beautiful rugs and jewelry made by local artisans, which Ayasha sold on consignment, making sure the makers got fair payment for their work. On opening day, more than 50 people came, Navajo and white and Mexican, drawn by curiosity and by the novelty of a store that welcomed everyone equally. Murphy was not among them, but Ayasha did not care. She stood behind the counter in a new dress, her hair braided with silver ornaments, and felt pride flowing through her. Dalton stood beside her, handsome in clean clothes, his arm around her waist. They had been married a week earlier in a ceremony that blended Navajo traditions with Christian elements, presided over by a Franciscan friar who had been kind to Ayasha's family and witnessed by both Dolly and Dalton's rancher friends from the Triple Bar. "What do you think?" Dalton murmured, watching the customers browse. "I think we did it," Ayasha said, leaning into him. "I think we actually did it." The first year was hard work, long hours and constant challenges. Murphy tried to undercut their prices, spread more rumors, even went so far as to try to get them shut down by claiming they were selling liquor to Indians without a permit, which was patently false. But the truth won out, and their reputation for fair dealing and quality goods spread. By the summer of 1879, they were profitable enough to hire help, bringing on Chi and 2 other young Navajo men to assist with stocking and freight. Dalton taught them basic business skills, how to keep books and manage inventory. Ayasha held English classes in the back room 2 evenings a week, teaching anyone who wanted to learn. It was during one of these classes, on a warm June evening with the door open to catch the breeze, that Ayasha realized she was pregnant. The signs had been there for a while. The missed monthly courses, the tender breasts, the way certain smells made her stomach turn. But she had been so busy that she had not put it all together until she stood up too quickly and the room spun around her. That night, lying in bed in the small house they had built behind the store, she told Dalton, "We are going to have a baby," she said, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat belly. In the lamplight, she saw tears gather in his eyes. "Truly?" "Truly, sometime around January, I think." He kissed her then deeply and thoroughly, and then kissed her belly with such tenderness that Ayasha started crying too. "We are going to be a family," he said wonderingly. "A real family." "We are already a family," Ayasha corrected. "This little one just makes it bigger." Their son was born on a cold January morning in 1880, delivered by Dolly with Dalton pacing outside like a nervous cat. They named him Samuel, after Dalton's father, with a Navajo name as well, Hashke, which meant angry, because he came into the world yelling his displeasure at the cold and did not stop for a solid hour. Dalton proved to be a devoted father, carrying Samuel in a cradle board on his back while working at the store, singing nonsense songs that made the baby gurgle with laughter, changing diapers without complaint. Watching him with their son, Ayasha fell even more deeply in love with her husband. The store continued to thrive. By 1882, they had expanded, adding a warehouse and hiring more staff. Dalton made good on his promise about the school, using their profits to build a small schoolhouse next to the trading post. Ayasha taught there, offering instruction in both English and Navajo, teaching mathematics and reading, but also traditional stories and customs. It was everything she had dreamed of. They had a daughter in 1883, a tiny thing they named Sarah Grace, and another son in 1885, Thomas, who they called Tommy. Their house grew to accommodate the expanding family, rooms added on in all directions until it sprawled comfortably across the land. Murphy's store went out of business in 1884. Without the willingness to adapt, to treat all customers fairly, he could not compete. Ayasha heard he moved to California, chasing some new scheme. She felt no satisfaction in his failure, only a quiet contentment in her own success. Dolly lived to see all 3 of her great-grandchildren, passing peacefully in her sleep in 1886 at the incredible age of 89. They buried her in the traditional way, and the entire community came to mourn her, Navajo and white alike. She had become a beloved figure, the wise old woman who sat outside the trading post telling stories to any child who would listen. As the years passed, the Begay Dalton Trading Company became more than just a store. It became a community center, a place where people gathered to share news, to celebrate weddings and births, to support each other through hard times. Ayasha and Dalton became leaders, respected for their fairness and their genuine commitment to bringing people together. In 1890, on their 12th wedding anniversary, Dalton took Ayasha up to the ridge above their property, where they could see everything they had built spread out below them. The store now substantially expanded. The school, where their oldest son Samuel, now 10, was learning to be a teacher like his mother. the warehouses and corrals, the little community of houses that had sprung up nearby as workers and their families settled in the area. "Do you remember what I said that first day?" Dalton asked, his arm around her waist. "That I was going to build you your own store?" "I remember thinking you were insane," Ayasha admitted, with a laugh. "A strange cowboy making wild promises to a desperate woman." "And now?" "Now I know you are insane," she teased, "but I also know you are the best man I have ever met. You kept every promise you ever made to me, Jackson Dalton. You built me a store, built me a school, built me a life beyond anything I could have imagined." "We built it together," he corrected. "I could never have done any of this without you. You are my partner in every sense of the word, Ayasha. My business partner, my wife, my best friend. Everything good in my life comes from you." She turned in his arms and kissed him. This man who had defended her in a dusty store 12 years ago, who had ridden 4 days to save her grandmother, who had worked beside her to build something that mattered. His hair was starting to gray at the temples now, and there were deep lines around his eyes from squinting into the desert sun. But to her, he was still the most handsome man in the world. "I love you," she said. "I will love you until the day I die and beyond, into whatever comes next." "Then I am the luckiest man who ever lived," Dalton replied. They stood there on the ridge as the sun set in glory across the Arizona sky, watching their children play in the yard below, watching smoke rise from cooking fires in the little community they had fostered. The territory was changing slowly but surely. There was still injustice, still prejudice, still hard times ahead. But here, in this little corner of the desert, they had built something better. They had built a place where everyone was welcome, where dignity and respect were not conditional on skin color or heritage. Years later, when they were old and gray and their grandchildren played around their feet, when Arizona had become a state and the old Wild West was fading into legend, people would still tell the story of the Navajo woman who was refused service and the cowboy who said he would build her a store. They told it as a love story, which it was, but it was also more than that. It was a story about standing up for what was right, about building bridges instead of walls, about the kind of courage it took to love across differences and build something new. The Begay Dalton Trading Company stood for over 70 years, through prosperity and depression, through wars and peace. But more than the building, more than the business, what endured was the legacy of two people who refused to accept the world as it was and instead built the world they wanted to see. Ayasha and Jackson lived long lives, blessed with children and grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren. They were buried side by side on that ridge overlooking their trading post, their names carved into matching stones. And on quiet evenings when the wind blows just right across the red rocks, locals swear you can still hear them up there, laughing together as they watch over the land they loved and the community they built. Their love story began with cruelty and prejudice, but it ended with hope and family and a legacy that touched hundreds of lives. They proved that love could bridge any divide, that determination and decency could overcome hatred, and that two people working together could change their corner of the world for the better. They built more than a store. They built a home, a community, and a testament to the power of seeing the humanity in every person you meet, regardless of where they came from or what they looked like. Builds and creates and nurtures is always there. Builds and creates and nurtures is always worth fighting for, always worth the risk, and always, always powerful enough to overcome the obstacles in its path. Their story became legend, passed down through generations, inspiring others to stand up, to build bridges, to choose love over fear. The trading post they built together stood as physical proof that one person's act of kindness, one person's refusal to accept injustice, could ripple outward and change everything. Samuel took over running the trading post when his parents grew too old, carrying on their legacy of fair dealing and equal treatment. He married a teacher from back east, a woman who loved the desert and embraced the community his parents had built. Their children grew up bilingual, straddling worlds just as their grandmother Ayasha had, but with the confidence that came from being rooted in a community that celebrated both heritages. Sarah Grace became a physician, one of the first Navajo women to earn a medical degree, inspired by the story of her father's mother who died for lack of treatment. She returned to Arizona and opened a clinic next to the family trading post, treating everyone regardless of their ability to pay. The sick and injured came from 100 miles around to see her, knowing they would be treated with skill and compassion. Tommy became a lawyer, fighting for Navajo rights in territorial and later state courts. He won landmark cases that expanded property rights and educational access, always crediting his parents' example of peaceful resistance and bridge building as his inspiration. On Ayasha's 80th birthday in 1913, the entire community came together to honor her. Over 300 people attended from all walks of life, all backgrounds. They shared stories of how she had helped them, taught them, welcomed them. Many of the white settlers spoke of how she had taught them to see Navajo people as neighbors and friends rather than threats. Many Navajo people spoke of how she had given them opportunities, education, and hope during some of the darkest times of their history. Dalton, 82 and still hearty though moving slower, stood and offered a toast. 60 years ago, I was a cowboy with a broken past and money in my pocket, but no purpose for it. Then I met a woman who was being treated shamefully, and something in me said, "This is your moment. This is when you become the man you are meant to be." I told her I would build her a store. He paused, his eyes wet with tears. But the truth is, she built me. She made me better than I ever could have been alone. Every good thing in my life flows from the day I took her hand and said, "Let us build something together." I would make that choice again every single day. Ayasha stood, her hair white as snow now, but her eyes still bright and sharp. "He tells a good story, my husband, but he forgets the important part. He did not just offer to build a store. He offered dignity. He offered respect. He saw me as fully human when others saw me as less. That gift, that simple act of recognizing my humanity, it changed everything." She looked around at the gathered crowd. "We built this together, all of us. Every person here who chose to shop at a store that welcomed everyone, who sent their children to a school that taught both languages, who reached across the divides that others said could not be crossed. You built this dream with us, and I hope you will continue building it long after we are gone." They died within 6 months of each other in 1915, Dalton first after a sudden fever, Ayasha following after what the family swore was simply a broken heart. They had been together for 37 years, partners in every sense, and neither could imagine going on without the other. At their joint funeral, people came from all over the state to pay respects. Former customers and students, government officials and tribal leaders, cowboys and shepherds and farmers and merchants. They all had stories about how Jackson and Ayasha had touched their lives, had made their world a little bit better. The trading post continued operating under Samuel's management and later his children's until 1948, when changing times and the rise of modern supermarkets finally forced it to close. But even then, the building was not demolished. The community preserved it as a historical site, a testament to what two people with courage and love could accomplish. The school Sarah Grace helped expand continued operating, eventually being absorbed into the state public school system, but maintaining its commitment to bilingual education and cultural respect. Historians wrote books about the Brigade Dalton Trading Company, analyzing it as an early example of inclusive business practices, of successful cross-cultural partnership, of resistance to the forced assimilation policies of the late 19th century. But for the descendants of Jackson and Ayasha, scattered now across the country, but still returning to Arizona for reunions, the story was simpler and more profound. It was a story about two people who met at the worst moment, when injustice and cruelty seemed triumphant, and chose to respond not with more hatred, but with creation. They built something good in the face of evil. They chose love when fear would have been easier. They committed to each other and to a vision of a better world. And then they did the hard daily work of making that vision real. the great-great-grandchildren playing on the same red rocks where Ayasha and Jackson once stood still heard the stories about how great-great-grandpa Jackson had stood up to a mean storekeeper, about how great-great-grandma Ayasha had been the smartest woman in the territory, about how they built a store and a school and a community, about how their love was legendary, about how they proved that different people could build a life together if they chose respect and partnership over prejudice and fear. And in those stories, passed down through generations, the dream lived on, the dream of a world where everyone was welcome, where love crossed all boundaries, where courage and compassion could overcome hatred and injustice. Jackson Dalton had promised to build Ayasha Begay a store, and he had kept that promise. But together they had built something infinitely more valuable, a legacy of love, equality, and hope that would endure long after the wood of that old trading post had weathered and grayed, long after their bones had returned to the red earth they loved, long after even their names had been nearly forgotten by history. They had built proof that love could change the world, one store, one school, one act of kindness at a time. And in the end, that was the truest and most beautiful story of all.